Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into NGN. I'm Julian, and I'm here today with Thor Gunnarsson. He's going to tell us about Everest VR. So what exactly is Everest VR?
Well, Everest VR is a visceral experience of what it feels like to summit Mount Everest, but in VR.
Right. So you took this thing that I would say is a life goal for pretty much everybody, right? That's the pinnacle of achievement, is climbing Mount Everest, and made it accessible to people. Was that the goal?
That was the general idea, yeah. We kind of, when we started our company, we were thinking about kind of what would be really interesting first projects for, the advent of VR. And we thought, if you pick some of these iconic locations where 99.99, pick your rounding error, of humanity will never go.
Yeah.
There have only been 4,000 people that have actually summited Everest historically. That's it.
Yeah, and many have attempted and either not reached it or
right.
Permanently not reached it. Like
Exactly.
They don't get a second attempt at it.
So maybe part of the motivation for us was, if we can create something that is really faithful to the experience of what it feels like to climb Everest, maybe that'll be sufficient for some, so there won't be as many real world attempts.
Definitely, no, because I would love to try and climb Everest, but I don't want to get in shape because I hate going to the gym, and I also have this fear of like death that I'm not a big fan of. So I think something like a VR experience climbing Everest would be ideal for somebody like me. How did you pull off putting the player in Everest?
Well, the main thing that we were really trying to do was create something that was super immersive to give that kind of elusive sense of presence in VR, but not do it in the method that a lot of kind of people that are developing kind of destination experiences are doing, which is the Spherical 360 video. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to have an environment that had a sense of agency, as you would in a video game. Real interactions, your ability to actually have an impact on what's happening around you, your ability to move through and traverse that environment. And so we created everything in Unreal Engine and basically constructed this as you would a modern video game. But basically trying to give you just enough agency in the environment for it to feel real for you. And that's obviously a combination of interaction mechanics, but also the whole audio-visual construction. And sometimes what we talk about are the reality cues that you create in a VR simulation to deepen that sense of immersion. Yeah. So we're doing a lot of that within the project.
I've seen people experiencing this VR and they're completely sucked into it as they play along, right? It takes you in at base camp first, and you make a sacrifice on an altar, right? Or an offering on an altar, I should say. And it pulls you in, gets you used to the haptics, and then next thing you're doing is crossing a bridge. Yeah. And people they're in a room and they could just step off this bridge, and nobody does that, correct? Yeah.
No, it's absolutely correct. we've had hundreds of people through, particularly that Khumbu Icefall demo, and the way people interact with the simulation is really fascinating. 90% of people will follow the simulation and stay on the ladder.
And 10% of people are just roguish.
The 10% of people are usually game designers.
Okay.
So they're the guys trying to break
it. Yeah.
Exactly. Or people in the industry, but your general player actually really enjoys the sense of verisimilitude and immersion again of following the simulation. So actually staying on the ladder, and frankly, a lot of people suffer from vertigo and fear of heights.
Really?
So we've had people that have had to lay down on the ground.
Wow.
And crawl across.
Wow.
We've had.
Do you film that on the outside, like for kicks? Is there
we've filmed some reaction videos. Yeah. Well, we have a nice collection that we've been building up basically over the past few months. But we've had other cases where we had a woman who was wearing some very nice stiletto heels. She puts the headset on and then insists that she has someone help her remove her heels because otherwise she can't find the rungs on the ladder.
Wow.
And she was standing on a carpeted surface.
Right, and you don't have to move your legs. That's not a part of it. But people still lift their legs to climb this ladder.
Absolutely. And even though you don't have feet in the simulation, you have tracked hands and you have the head position. And people just begin to fill in the gaps. So you see people pumping their legs when they're climbing the ladder up.
They have that unsatisfying, like their foot's not landing, like when you think there's one more stair.
And that comes up a little bit against the limitations of VR, as we obviously don't have full body simulation.
Could you put a ladder in front of them, like if they had help as they're doing it?
That's an interesting idea. Maybe we should do like a mixed reality one with actual physicals. Yeah.
I've always wanted, I was hoping you could put in the game, like when you get to the summit of VR, just put in a little step ladder. Because if I were to ever climb Mount Everest, I would bring one just to go 3 feet higher.
3 feet higher
than everybody else.
Yeah. Or we could just, do a hover lift for you.
Just have somebody lift,
Because we kind of at the end of Everest, when you actually reach the summit, we kind of play with the format a little bit. And, most of the experience is very close to real life. When you reach the summit, you plant the flag of your nation on the peak of Everest. What we actually then segue into is a accelerated day-night cycle. So you experience a 24-hour cycle in 2 minutes.
Do you
in
have
real time.
the stars mapped
Yes.
out accurately above you going by?
Yeah, absolutely. Accurate star map of the environment.
phenomenal.
You know, the sun is rising and setting in the right position. It's all rendering in real time. And so you get to do an impossible thing, which humans don't do, which is stay on the summit of Everest for 24 hours. You know, when you climb Everest, you go up, you stay for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then you go back down because you're in the death zone.
Yeah.
This is not a place where the human body can actually, survive.
The death zone, is that the affectionate nickname for it?
That's what it's called,
Wow.
yeah.
So it's not a hospital place.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but in VR, you get this awesome moment where you get to experience something that humanity can't experience in the real world. So that's kind of where the strength of the medium really comes in, where you can play a little bit with the rules of physics, time dilation, all of these things. And in fact, when you finish the first playthrough of Everest, you then go into a God mode where you're standing over the Himalayas, towering over the mountain. And you can actually zoom in from a scale of about 2 kilometers above the mountain, all the way down to true accurate scale, where you see actual tiny figures climbing up the Lhotse face.
That's amazing.
And these are climbing expeditions.
And
so
it's all rendered real time.
all rendered in real time.
And it was all compiled, you say you used, what, 6 Titan X's?
Yeah, we with our production partner RVX, we actually used a technique called stereophotogrammetry to take a database of high-resolution images that were shot on site at Everest.
Right.
We used then basically a pipeline that had featured 6 Titan X GPUs in the system, and it was basically taking the photos and constructing the point cloud that gave us the 3D volume basically,
Right.
and then from there churning through to create the mesh, and then doing all of the work to then reapply the photos as actual textures on the model. So it's actually the closest you can get to a photorealistic representation of that mountain range, as certainly as we've seen, professionally.
That's phenomenal. And you said you guys took something like 300,000 photos?
Yeah,
to
it was
pull
a
this off?
huge amount of photos,
Yeah.
and you have to get the photo.
How many photographers died doing this?
Hopefully
Hopefully not.
no photographers died in the making of this
Okay.
experience.
There's going to be a little disclaimer at the end. That's phenomenal. For full immersion, do you recommend people crank up their AC and breathe through a straw?
Yeah, AC helps. We actually breathing through a straw is an interesting one.
Right.
I'm not-
Less oxygen.
Maybe
up
we
there.
could do like an accessory deal for a bag of straws that goes with.
Or you could have like an oxygen tank that actually makes it harder to
Right,
breathe, right?
right.
That you could have underneath the Vive.
Well, I'll tell you what's really fascinating is we're experimenting with some techniques using, again, these sort of reality cues, in this case, audio cues, where you start hearing a heartbeat in the background.
Oh.
And if we speed up the heartbeat, the adrenaline level of the person actually in the experience goes up.
No kidding.
And what we've seen, and this is borne out by some research, is you actually see people begin to sync to the cue.
There's an actual physiological response to
Yeah.
this VR experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen people in a full adrenaline rush come out of the demo, where they're sweating, pupils are dilated. They've had clearly a fight or flight response.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is, I think that's about as immersive as you could hope for, where you trick the human body into a panic.
Yeah.
Well done, you.
Oh, thank you.
When can people check out this VR experience?
We're coming out on HTC Vive this summer, so we're hard at work basically putting the finishing touches to it, but we'll be out real soon and just looking forward to seeing feedback and how people are kind of reacting to it.
That's phenomenal. I can't wait to try it out myself, and then I won't actually have to go to Everest. Thor Gunnarsson of Everest VR, thanks you guys for tuning in.